Alright, so today we're going to show you how to turn this into this. Today we're going to go over how to remove the wraps, all the hardware, and stain your drum set. I just bought this kit for $100 used. You can see here that it's well used. That's a good chunk of the wrap coming off. So these are all dented up and banged up and gross. We're going to make them look really good. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to take off the rims using a drum key on like a drill bit because it's a lot quicker. Then we're going to take off the mounting hardware and the lugs, and we'll go from there. So basically all the hardware, anything metal, once you take the heads off and the rims off, you can see the screws inside and then they just pop off. So let's get that done. So once you get the heads off, you can just see there's lots of Phillips screws in there. So once again, it's good to have a drill bit Phillips screwdriver. And then you got 3 more here. And you're going to have to hold the back with either a wrench or a socket or something so that they don't come out. One little tip is when you're doing this, I use a bucket or something to put all my screws and hardware in. You can use a separate one for each drum if your lugs are different sizes or your rods are different sizes, but I'm pretty sure these ones are all the same sizes on here, so I'm just going to put them all in here. I just don't want to lose anything in the process because we're taking them all off. For the next part, take just a regular heat gun. You can get these at Walmart or Canadian Tire or whatever for 20 bucks or whatever hardware stores you got in the States or wherever you are. And you're going to want to heat up where the seam is. I can find the seam right here because there's a bunch of glue under there. As it comes back, I don't know if they glued the whole thing all the way around or just part. So we're going to continue to go and heat it up. Don't overheat it. You don't want to melt it. You're going to make more work for yourself. Just enough to be able to peel it apart. I can get this off after, and then we're going to be sanding it. Once you get it all the way across and then the adhesive melted, basically do the same on this side. So just for the record, I thought I'd point out, this is how the seam should look when you use the proper amount of heat from the heat gun. I was definitely going too much. Just maybe 2 passes across it and then pull. 2 passes across it once it cools down and then pull. I was using too much heat, and that's why it turned out looking kind of like that. I'll still be able to sand that off, but that's easier. So don't use too much heat. Next up, because these drums are in pretty rough shape, I took an electric sander. I'm using 220 grit and just doing a light sand over the outside. Everything's nice and smooth, and I had to use 120 grit for the tape and give a lot of pressure. It was really hard to get that adhesive off, but I would go by hand if you were using maybe a more expensive wood or expensive kit, but just because this is a cheapo and I'm just trying to do this to see if it works, yeah, it worked really well. Just watch out for your bearing edges too. You don't want to be sanding these. These ones are actually in half decent condition, seeing how bad these drums were, so I'm probably not going to recut them. Once again, I'm just doing this more as a test. I'm not going to use this as my main kit. So now I've taken some painter's tape and masked off the bearing edges. I don't want to get any stain on the edges. And basically, if you want to make a neat design, you can wrap it around the middle. I'm just going to stain the whole thing one color. So let's get started. So now we'll let this dry. That's already looking pretty awesome. Here's a quick update. You'll see here I actually ended up staining the inside. When you do this, make sure you tape up those holes. I don't know if you can almost plug them up with like styrofoam or something like that. I've seen guys who do powder coating do that. But I got a few drops of stain inside the drum, and I tried sanding a little bit off, but it was too far gone. So I figured I'd just stain the inside. The second thing you'll notice is I went right to the edge. Some of it got under that painter's tape and it just looked like crap. So what I did was I stained all the way to the edge. So that's where we're at right now. They're all done. I'm going to wipe them down real good and start the clear coat next. And once we get that drying, we'll start working on cleaning up some of this old dirty, rusty hardware. I just put painter's tape over the inside of the holes there. By doing that, that should stop any clear coat from dropping into the drum. Another tip, it's good to wear gloves when doing this stuff. Took a long time to get all that stain off of my hands yesterday, so I'm changing it up a little bit. So we've got some Varathane here, just a semi-gloss clear coat. I'm going to apply about 7 coats of this stuff and give it very light sanding in between with like very low grit sandpaper. Here we go. I found there's a real trick to this. You want to be thick enough that it's going to actually build. I was way too thin before, and as soon as I started sanding, I burned right through it. But you also don't want to be too thick that it runs. I've seen a lot of videos, they have hardwood floors and countertops, so you can put it on like super thick and it's not going to run because it's flat. On a drum, as soon as you hit the side here, I can already see it wants to start running. So I just go back over it with the brush every couple passes I do. And then I'll continue on here. I make sure by the time I'm done, my brush is pretty empty. And then just keep going back. I'll do one full rotation when it's done. On the base drum, you got to be careful because it's large enough that by the time you go all the way around, it starts drying. And then my last couple coats, I get thinner as I go. Because you don't want to do too much sanding. And on my last coat, I'm going to go real thin, because I don't sand the last coat to keep it pretty glossy looking. And lastly, I'll come up the side of the drum, and at the light coming this way, I can see if I got anything running down the side. That one looks pretty good. The lighting in here isn't great, but you see these two on the right here have already been done. Let's find one that hasn't. You can see this stuff's in pretty rough shape. It's definitely not as shined up. I'm just using a bit of brasso, putting it on a rag and wiping it down and then wiping it off after. I did buy an attachment for a drill. Goes on the end, it's a wire brush. If you got lots of rust that's not coming out, you can kind of go at it with that. I've done a couple of these things because you can see here this one's really pitted. You're not going to get the pitting out, but any of the rust that was on there I got, and it doesn't really seem to scratch it. And once you over with the brasso, it's all right. This is kind of a best effort thing. It was a cheap drum set, just trying it out. If you really wanted to do this, you'd probably be using better wood and maybe find one either with better hardware or replace it. I'm not looking at spending a few $100s on drum hardware for this project. We covered all of that in brasso and wiped it off. It looks pretty clean. It's 100 times better than it was, and the shells themselves look nice. So if you do want to do this with a really old kit, it might be something to invest a couple $100s into hardware, but we're going to put this back on. So after clear coating these things and sanding them multiple times, I'm going to tell you, clear coating sucks. Staining was easy, sanding was easy, dealing with the hardware was easy. I'm getting it pretty close here. I noticed still, I went on really thick, had some runs, but it was better for sanding after. So I went quite thick on the first ones. You got to be careful about runs. Make sure you clean your brush out real well and try not to get too many brush strokes in there. And as soon as I'd sand it, it looks like crap. So the last few coats you cannot sand. So to finish off, I went from like an 800 to a 2500 grit sandpaper and did a wet sand. Kept it really, really wet. Seemed to help. Still looked kind of rough after, so I buffed it out just using my orbital sander with a rag, and it seemed to clean it up pretty good. If you want it glossy, my last clear coat, absolutely don't sand it. Did that, put the hardware back together, and this drum set already sounds decent. I just half tuned it in here. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Renewed, all the hardware looks great, it's nice and shiny. Here's a couple pictures of it. So yeah, for $100 or $50 at a garage sale, you can buy an old junker and have a decent looking kit. If you like this, click like and subscribe below, it helps me out. If you have any questions, ask below and I'll do my best to answer them.